Cannibalism. It's been the subject of countless jokes, true. But I wonder just how many of you know what you're laughing at. None of this was staged for the camera. Indeed, their very indifference makes this footage all the more chilling. By the way, the white worms that this woman finds so appetizing have been left in the corpse for several days to absorb body fluids and thus enhance their taste. Huh? In an age when we are reduced to a list of component parts through genetic research, the fact that some of us still eat one another is apparently of little interest. And make no mistake, cannibalism is still practiced today, in 1988. What you're watching is taking place in Papua New Guinea, and it remains the least explored part of the inhabited world, where hundreds of thousands of its inhabitants do not know of the existence of white men. In the mountainous interior, there exist people whose lifestyle has remained unchanged for thousands of years. There's no documented evidence to suggest that cannibalism is practiced for any cultural or religious reasons either. Rather, evidence suggests that cannibalism is a part of the barbaric savagery that comes naturally to people such as these. The Kukuyu tribe, of which that particular woman is a member, believe that when a person dies, his body must remain above ground for a minimum of 10 days.
What about some nasty stuff?
Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for that interruption.
Come on, show us some death. Somebody told us this movie was about death.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's very unfortunate, but that's the producer, Mr. Gravenhorse himself. I'll be back in one moment, excuse me. Mr.
Come on, who pays you?
You're going to see a lot of things in the course of this video that you've never dreamt you'd ever see. And you're going to be told about some things that you didn't even know existed. Come join us on a bizarre journey through Death Faces 4. You know, the idea of cutting through the gristle and cartilage of your child's nose with a piece of sharpened bone and then plugging the wound with an ornament of polished human bone is naturally pretty repugnant to you. For a boy growing up amongst the Kukuyu tribe, it is confirmation of his passage into manhood, and to achieve it, he must first prove he is worthy. He must kill an animal or a human being and drink its blood before the men of the village. Last year, this practice was banned in Cleveland. Preparation of a corpse for burial is considered a sacred and vital task in New Guinea. Just as important as if the corpse were to be eaten, which in the case you're watching, it won't be. Yes, madam, that is what you thought it was. As the deceased is in fact a relative. Mourners and relatives are required to guard the dead against possession by any nearby spirits until the body is placed in a temporary coffin. Usually off the ground, in the trees, in a bush. Right? Bring out your dead, right? They keep the spirits at bay by constantly disturbing the air around the body. The grotesque swelling evident in this corpse is caused by elephantiasis, which along with malaria, dysentery, and leprosy is a common disease in central New Guinea. Within a few days of this particular scene, the body will be placed in a makeshift coffin and left for up to 10 weeks in a shelter which may not touch the ground. For they believe that if that were to happen, the dead man's spirit would not be able to leave. It's probably worth mentioning at this point that whereas birth and life are at the very heart of most New Guinea's tribes' existence, the Kikuyus are notably different. To them, life is nothing more than a necessary stage in development, and the only true meaning is death. It's believed that the Kukuyu currently number between 50 and 100,000. At one time, there were many more of them, and they had very few neighbors. But their numbers diminished rapidly during the preceding century, in large part due to the fact that they had no one to eat but themselves. This is actually true. These guys ate themselves. And to the fact that women were just as much warriors as the men were, and were just as likely to butcher one of their own males if a hunting party returned unsuccessful. These people had developed a taste for human flesh that had made them utterly mindless to the fact that they were destroying the very fabric of their society. At the height of this cannibalistic orgy, little or no provocation was needed for one person to kill or in fact eat another. And hardest of all to believe is that parents were known to have killed their children, although for reasons not known, only the heads were eaten. Almost all the information that found its way back to civilization in those days came from missionaries whose tales of fierce man-eating tribes were treated with tolerant amusement at best. Which is fairly understandable, especially since some of the things they described sounded more like horror fiction than the truth. However, there are sufficient instances of corroboration to at least prevent us from dismissing these stories out of hand. As I mentioned earlier, there is no evidence to suggest any connection between cannibalism and religion. There is certainly circumstantial evidence linking cannibalism and sexual aberration. In a remote highland area of New Guinea known as the Foray region, a small tribe was known to exist that even the ferocious Kikuyus were afraid of. They were visited in the late 18th century by two Dutch missionary explorers and are the subject of two gruesome stories. Both missionaries claim to have witnessed a man and a woman enter the village from the jungle with the corpse of a female tied to a pole. On stopping at what turned out to be their hut, the woman proceeded to start a fire under a large flame-blackened bowl, while to their horror the man proceeded to engage in sexual intercourse with the dead woman. At this point, the woman proceeded to hack pieces of flesh from the corpse and throw them into the pot. In her frenzy, she accidentally hacked off her husband's penis while it was still inside the corpse, and as he lay bleeding to death, she calmly withdrew it from the dead woman and ate it before his very eyes. On another occasion, both men had noticed that some villagers had several bite marks up and down the length of both arms. It must have come close to pushing them over the edge, therefore, to see one woman sitting in front of her hut, taking bites out of her own arm. If it's true, it's the first reported case of auto-cannibalism since 17th century Peru. As to why these men were able to walk into and then out of the village unharmed, no one can say. Some missionaries certainly did end up on the dinner table, but the vast majority were left alone and were largely regarded with nothing more than curiosity by the natives. Come join Death Faces 4 on a journey through the supernatural. The Kukuyu tribe is in a state of panic. Warriors are huddled together in darkened rooms, illuminated only by candlelight. Their witch doctors go out only in groups. What has happened to frighten these ferocious warriors so? Messengers have been recently arriving from the hill country, bringing news that the Kuman's tribe is heading south. The Kuman's tribe is possibly the only group on Earth before whom the Kukuyus would run. The social order of this mighty tribe has been thrown into disarray, and they have become frightened men. Then shockingly, the true nature of their predicament is revealed to them. there are Kuman assassins in their very midst. And in the middle of the Kukuyu village, the assassins strike down and murder the chief witch doctor. Immediately, the act of dismemberment begins. Shockingly, insultingly, 2 members of the assassination squad are women. Just who are these people who can cast such fear into a savage band of cannibals, such as the Kukuyus? Spirits and invisible powers play an important part in the life of the Kumans. When they are faced with problems they cannot explain, such as illness, madness, and death, they seek refuge in the world of fantasy and magic. The Kumans believe, apart from magic, there are also real spirits around them, disembodied beings who observe and judge all human actions. The spirit world of the Kumans is abundantly populated. There is first the spirit Kangi, which lives in the shady banks of rivers and sometimes assumes the shapes and clothing of a man. It slaughters pigs during the night and eats them. It will kill men and women who make love out of doors. If the Kangi gets into a house, it is chased out by a medicine man, who then plants a row of sticks in front of the hut as a warning to the spirit not to molest the hut again. There is another spirit which lives under great stones in remote places and can embody itself as a bat. It flies around at night and steals produce from the fields. But nowadays the Kumans do not fear this spirit. They catch and devour all the bats they can eat. 2 other spirits frequent swamps and lakes. They too take on human shape. In the darkest shadows of the jungle live 2 other spirits who can transform themselves into young men and have a habit of slaughtering pigs with stone axes. For her part in the murder of the Kukuyu witch doctor, this young assassin has earned the right to wear the mark of Kismani, most famous of all female Kuman warriors. This grotesque tattoo is worn like a badge of honor by the young warrior. The tattoo is applied by a fellow warrior, and it's done with painstaking care and great attention to detail. For this is the most prestigious mark that a warrior can wear. It has been worn by only 2 female warriors before her. Astonishingly, the 3 Kuman warriors are totally unmolested as they relax in the very center of the Kukuyu village. It would seem that by destroying the local witch doctor, they had rendered the entire warrior section of the population harmless. For the only people out in the village square watching the ceremony are women and children. The once proud, once mighty, savage Kukuyu warriors are nowhere to be seen. It is difficult to explain the behavior of the Kukuyu warriors. These people have no totem figures or gods, and from their scanty rituals one is inclined to conclude that what they worship most is physical strength. Their strongest warriors rule the tribe, and tribal life is marked by fights, raids, and murders. And yet the whole Kukuyu army, fierce, proud cannibals all, have been controlled and subdued by just 3 enemy warriors. A Danish explorer, upon arriving in the New Guinea wilderness in the 1930s, wrote, "There is an aura about this place that tells me I am in the presence of death. It's as if death, not life, were the purpose of all existence here. And evidence of it is all around me. It feels at once brooding, mysterious, and forbidding. Yesterday I was permitted to visit the tribal burial ground, and it is an experience I can never forget. Immediately after a man has died, the corpse is smeared with grease and decorated with shells, put on a rough table and exposed in the village square. Relatives smeared in mud and clay sit by the body, holding its hands and feet and howling and lamenting loudly. The women mourners especially show no restraint in their mourning. They beat themselves with stones until the blood flows, cut off their earlobes and break their fingers. A mourning rite sometimes precipitates a bloody quarrel. Everywhere I looked, I could see grinning skulls, skeletal remains, and perched on a ledge sat several mummies propped in an upright position. They gave off a foul stench and were crawling with ants, caterpillars, and other vermin. The heads of the mummies were propped up with arrows, so that they retained a posture of awareness even in death. I felt as if I had somehow been transplanted back from the world I knew to a place where darkness and evil held sway. And I had little difficulty in imagining members of this ferocious tribe stalking the jungle paths and laying in wait for hapless members of neighboring villages, whereupon they would be killed immediately and brought back to be eaten. It was therefore with some trepidation that I realized I was in the midst of a strange cannibalistic tribe, and could be the person they next put on their death faces for. A ritual known as the boring of the noses takes place usually before puberty. This ordeal gives a boy an opportunity to show he can take pain without flinching. If he puts up resistance, he is held down by 2 men, while another, often boy's uncle, rubs his nose with water and then makes a hole in the gristle between the nostrils with the pointed bone of a bird. When the bone is withdrawn, a feather from the wing of a bird is put through the hole, a magic symbol supposed to ensure the boy the speed of a bird in hunting or fighting. For some youngsters, no matter how hard they try, the pain of the ordeal proves too much. A tear left his eyes. Not a sound passed his lips. And when the ceremony is over, he receives the congratulations of his elders. One more ceremony passed through on his way to adulthood. This one he doesn't quite understand. And now, live from New Guinea, it's time for Candid Cannibal with Ivor Biggin. Ivor! Come in, Ivor! Well, we seem to have problems with the audio hookup to New Guinea. We have visual, okay? Ivor, are you there? I'm afraid we seem to have lost Ivor Biggin for the moment. But so long as we still have pictures of this fascinating competition, we will stay with the competition. Ah, yes. Yes, this is a smooth operator here, quite definitely. This is a man who's made many a shell before. Look how neatly that fits. That's very nice. Notice the smooth lines. Well, almost. Well, now we seem to have lost visual as well, I'm afraid. So what we'll do is we'll leave the local feed we seem to have picked up from New Guinea, and we'll put on some music. Considered something of a delicacy in New Guinea. And as you'll see, the potato has many uses in the highlands. These young men sit there and bore out a hole in the middle of the potato. And of course, warm it up. blowing gently on the potato to cool it down. This strange New Guinean tribe, the potato heads, find themselves virtual outcasts from the rest of society. They teach their children these strange practices from an early age, handing around potatoes, which they encourage them to wear proudly. Ivor! We picked up a live feed again, ladies and gentlemen. And here we have a gentleman, obviously too embarrassed to turn around. Oh, of course, that's a beauty. Now that is a custom-made potato head. Ladies and gentlemen, death has many faces.